if you started seedlings this spring, you might start looking at them thinking, now what do I do with them? Is it time to plant them? Do I need to put them in a larger pot? What is it that I need to do? Well, the first thing that you're looking for when you have your seedlings is what are called the first true leaves. And that's the leaves that reflect the actual plant that you planted. Now, a lot of times seedlings come up and they present these leaves, which are known as the seed leaves or the cotyledons. And this is actually part of the seed. And they'll emerge first, and that's what actually gives the seedling energy to then produce more roots and to grow more of those true leaves. These are what are known as the true leaves. And at this point, this is when we know that the seedling is off to a great start. It has established itself, it's got some roots, and it's starting to photosynthesize and create its own energy. Now, cotyledons can look different from plant to plant, but they don't reflect the plant itself. And so we can't identify a plant necessarily based off of the cotyledons, but be aware that they can look different. Here we have a morning glory, and you can see this is the traditional true leaf of a morning glory. But initially we had these cotyledons. Again, they're kind of a divided leaf, but they don't reflect or represent the true leaf at all. And so you can't really identify the plant based off of that cotyledon. So as the energy from those cotyledons go into the plant and it continues to grow, you can see the cotyledons just start to die and wilt down and eventually fall off. But at that point, you've got your plant established. It should be photosynthesizing and producing its own energy. Now again, I mentioned that cotyledons might look different. So here we have some tomato plants, and you can see the original cotyledons here have kind of a long linear shape to them, and they don't represent what the tomato plant looks like at all. Here you can see we've got a couple of sets of true leaves now growing, and these do represent a tomato plant. So you would be able to identify this as a tomato plant now at this point. So again, what we're waiting for on our seedlings is to find those first sets of true leaves to know that our seedling is well established and has some good roots. So at that point, you can take a look at this, and you can see here we've got a 6-pack that we planted, and for the most part we planted one seed in each one of these cells. Now over here we do have a little bit of a hitchhiker that got in there. This is a broccoli plant. So we don't want this broccoli to continue to grow because it'll provide competition for our tomato plant. So we're just going to go in there and pinch that out, and that'll prevent that from continuing to grow. And by pinching it or cutting it, we're not going to interfere with any root growth from that tomato. If we just pulled it out, then we would potentially damage some of the roots of that tomato. So this 6-pack, these little seedlings are good to go. We don't need to pot them up. They have plenty of room to grow out and until we need to plant them out in our garden. Now, some of you I know prefer to plant more than one seed in a cell at a time when you're doing that, and that's fine, but you might find that some of them came up, all of them came up, and so here we've got a few that have either 3 and in some cases even 4 little seedlings come up. And the thing about this is they provide competition for one another, and so we really again don't want all of them to grow because then they're all going to be weak. So you want to just go in there with your finger and either snip it back with your fingernail if you have fingernails, or you can just go in with some little snippers and then take out those just like that. Being cautious not to damage the one that you're wanting to keep. So at this point, those two will not continue growing. We have our main one here, and that will continue growing. The other option that you can do is to gently turn the cell over and pull out one of them that has multiple plants in there, and then gently tease the seedlings apart. Now this isn't necessarily the recommended way because again you can see that we might be causing some damage to the roots, but I know some people like to take advantage of all the seedlings that they might have grown, and so this is one option of doing that. So we're going to go ahead and sacrifice this little guy here in the middle and just gently tease these two bigger ones apart. And at this point we can now plant these up. You can see the amount of roots that are growing on there, and again we knew that those roots would be there because we've got true leaves on these seedlings. Now, if you planted your seedlings in something like this, a peat pot, or maybe one of these biocell foam things, you want to make sure that you get those definitely in a larger pot, because at this point you can see the roots are exposed and they need something more to grow in. So we need to give them bigger space for those roots to continue to grow and for the plant to continue to grow above. You can see we do have true leaves. This is a tomato plant, and how different that look is from the cotyledon. We do have 2 seedlings in here, and because these are in a foam core thing, really we're not going to be able to divide these apart. So I'm just going to come in here and snip one of these off. So we've got 1 seedling to pot up. Now you might notice that I don't have much soil or potting media in our pot here, and that's because it's just easier to go ahead and put our plant right in there and then fill in around it. You can see that we're planting the seedling back at the same depth that it has been growing at as we fill in more potting media around it. Now the thing also you want to be aware of is not to fill this pot up with potting media all the way to the top, because when you water it, then that's just going to wash off. So we've left a little bit of a gap there so that it works as a well to hold that water in as it percolates down over it. So again, we had 2 seedlings in this, and we need to go ahead and trim one of them off. This one's more in the center, so that's why I'm choosing to cut this one back. But they're about the same plant, so there's no really reason why to pick one over the other. So we've got these done. Now we just need to give them some water. And at this point, they could use a very mild, weak, water-soluble fertilizer. So we've mixed some in here, and we're just going to go ahead and give those guys a drink now. All right, so we've got them watered in, and you might have noticed that that water kind of lets them flop a little bit because they're not quite rooted in, obviously. So you might just want to prop them up a little bit, make sure that soil is nice and tight around those roots. And at that point, once we've watered them, we want to make sure the water has gone all the way through and you're seeing it drain out the bottom. That's important so that we know the whole soil profile has gotten wet. Again, continue to water with a mild or weak fertilizer solution, and at this point they will continue growing and get bigger until you're ready to transplant them out into your garden.
We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.